Hello and welcome to Thursday Thoughts. Thursday Thoughts? What on earth are they, I hear you ask? Well, my friend Lucy and I meet every week over on Instagram to talk all things personal growth because she is as obsessed with it as I am. And we decided that we might as well put those conversations out as a weekly podcast. So now you can listen to us chat here on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we'll be talking about topics such as spirituality, limiting beliefs, the ego, imposter syndrome, gratitude, meditation, confidence, and so much more. So if you're ready, here we go.
So we're talking about growth mindset, learning and growth mindsets. And when we messaged about this, I literally I don't even know where it came from. But when we had that conversation, you were like, any ideas? I was like, and it just came to mind. It's obviously something that I've thought about in the past. And although I kind of wish I'd done some research on this, because I think it's such a big topic. But I guess shall I kick things off, Holly?
What to you? What is a growth mindset? Maybe start there.
Yeah. So I think it's essentially a growth mindset is this idea, or if we start from the idea, I think when we're growing up that we are a certain intelligence and it's kind of fixed. So either you are, you're one of the bright kids at school, or you're kind of one of the average kids at school, or you're one of the, less intelligent kids at school. So in my own case, I definitely was not one of the academic kids at school. And my brother and sister were always, we actually all three went to different schools, weirdly, but they were always super intelligent. And I always held a belief that I wasn't very intelligent. And it's something I carried with me for most of my life. And it's that idea. So the difference between having a fixed mindset or on a very, very, very basic level is the idea that actually you can get smarter. You can learn your way to becoming smarter. So I think that's essentially what it's about. And ages and ages ago, I read a book called Mindset by Carol Dweck, which you've probably read it, Polly. You've certainly heard of it, yeah. And actually, I found it really quite a dense and quite a difficult read.
I don't think
it is. Yeah, it's definitely a difficult read. But I did read the whole thing. But it was like, oh God, it felt like a real effort. But speaking of the word effort, actually, that is what this is all about, because what her studies have shown, and again, this is like on the most basic level, like anyone else needs to, go off and do more research about this. But from what I can remember, growth mindsets, it's really interesting that the studies that Carol Dweck did, and these are really, really, really important studies, because what she found was that there is a really big difference between intelligence feedback and effort feedback. So especially when we're kids, in that kind of, that learning phase, for that sort of intensive learning phase of our life, when we're kids and our brains are kind of growing and changing, if we are told that we are really smart or really talented or really good at this or that, weirdly and kind of ironically, it's actually less beneficial to us than if we're told that we are really good at making an effort at doing something. And in fact, those people who are the study, I mean, I wish I could, again, I should have researched this. I should have kind of had some studies to hand, but it's something to do with the fact that when you are told that you are good at something, so basically if your kind of identity is attached to how good you are at something as opposed to the effort, then you're actually less likely to continue to improve or to get better when you think that you are intelligent. Whereas when you are told that you are, you're making a real effort, and when it's not your identity that's attached, it's the effort that you make, then you're more likely to grow and improve and get better, which is really, really interesting. So essentially, it's the idea that we can become better at things. And, I think so much of this actually goes back to belief, and also it goes back to persistence, Because if we have a fixed mindset, we think, for example, I've always had a fixed mindset that I am shit at maths. I still have a fixed mindset that I am shit at maths. I am shit at maths. That's just a fact. However, if I really wanted to, I could improve. I could get better at maths. So it's just having that, I suppose it's having that open mind, knowing that you can get better. And also the other thing I think is, it's with a growth mindset, you can cultivate the ability to, if you fail at something, like if you have a fixed mindset and you fail at something, you're much more likely to sort of throw all your toys out of the pram and go, oh well, that's it, but this is rubbish and this is a waste of time and I'm going to quit. Whereas when you have a growth mindset and you fail at something, you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep going, and you don't quit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think with that failure piece, that's such a big part of it. It's more about, well, what can I actually learn about this situation? Actually seeing the failure not as a bad thing, but actually as an opportunity for growth. And what and as hard as that can be in that moment, but actually if you've got a growth mindset, it's like, okay, there is going to be some sort of lesson on the other side of this. This is, whatever that failure might be, it might just be a really difficult time you're going through. And rather than just going, everything goes wrong for me, everything is really shit, it's actually like, okay, things are really hard right now, but I know that when I get to the other side, there will be something I can take out of that. There will be something positive. So it's that sort of looking for the opportunities for continual growth, because that is what we as human beings have always done. If we didn't have a growth mindset, we'd still be living in caves, kind of, in those basic times. Everything we see around us is because we have failed and failed again and failed again, and we've used that as an opportunity to grow and learn and keep developing. But it's so interesting what you were saying, Lucy, about you having a mindset of just like going, I'm not very clever one. So I was put in a box as a child, slightly differently. I was the clever one. So I was the one who was meant to be really clever, whereas my sister was put in a different box. And, no, not blaming anybody, it's just the way it was. But I would rely very heavily on the fact that I was clever, because that's what I was being told. So I kind of breezed through my first GCSEs and those sorts of exams. But when it got to A levels, it's a slightly different ball game. Suddenly, I couldn't just rely on being kind of clever. You actually have to put some effort in. And I hadn't learned that lesson, that I had to put effort in. And I didn't put enough effort into A level, so I didn't do as well as I was meant to do. The same went on when I went to do my degree. I still had this sort of mindset, I don't have to put the effort in. And I didn't do as well as I didn't do as well as I should have done. So it's very interesting. So that was a lesson I had to learn much later on in life, that actually if I work hard, then I'm going to get the results. And I think that was quite hard to learn at that stage in life. And I then, it then really knocked my confidence. It was a bit like, well, actually, I'm not clever. I'm actually quite stupid. And, so it's ridiculous that we go through that, that we think that about ourselves. And actually, it's like, no, we're just always learning. And when I was teaching, in fact, it was such an important thing to really foster this growth mindset in the kids. And it was so interesting how some kids in the classroom, and you're right, it is the ones who are the brighter ones, generally like, I get everything right, tick, tick, tick. And I used to always as a teacher go, the last thing I want to see is a page of ticks down down the page. That's not, I don't want you getting everything right, because that shows that you're not challenging yourself. What I want to see is making mistakes and learning, because that shows me that you're learning rather than getting everything correct. It's a kind of a real shift. And even kids today find that really difficult. Some kids find that really difficult. It's like, no, I just want to get all the ticks down the page, No, really embrace the getting it wrong and learning from those mistakes, because honestly, that's how we learn. If we're getting everything right, what are we learning? We're not learning anything at all.
A very quick break to ask you to hit the follow or subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you're enjoying this episode, I'd be super grateful if you could hit those stars and rate it too. Thank you.
Yeah, it's so interesting what you say about yourself, because literally what you said about yourself is a perfect example of the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And the fact that you were told, again, it's going back to this, if you are told that you are clever, as opposed to you are told that, you know, well done, you're making a real effort. And it's so interesting what you said about the fact that you breezed through your GCSEs, but when you got to A level and university, then it was different because you'd been told that you were the clever one. The irony was that it was then harder for you to do well because you had this fixed mindset of, well, I'm clever and da 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 da. So actually, that's such a brilliant example. But it is definitely that kind of when it comes to, you know, when we said we were going to do this topic, we said learning and growth mindset, and I think ultimately, when you're one of those people who thinks you know everything, you know, the people that think they know everything are the ones that have everything to learn. Whereas actually the people who are, in my opinion, much more interesting and much more knowledgeable are the ones that are constantly learning and who know that actually the more that they learn, the less that they realize that they know. You know, it's people who, it's having that kind of beginner's mindset. And I think this is sort of related to growth mindset. It's a beginner's mindset. It's the idea that, you know, you start everything as a beginner and you're never going to know everything. But if you start with a beginner's mindset, then it's just having that sort of openness to learning. And yeah, I think that's really, really, really important.
Yeah, exactly. So you're having that beginner's mindset, and then also just being open for feedback, because I think this is a big part of it. So many of us hate it when we're being, you know, if you're doing something and someone kind of almost points out, okay, well, maybe you can get better by doing it like this. And sometimes that can feel really uncomfortable because you feel like you're not doing it right as such. You know, when I was training to be a teacher, my goodness, the amount of times we were being observed and watched, and always, you know, it was like, this is what you're doing well, but this is how you can improve. And sometimes that was hard to take, because you want to hear, you want that validation. It's like, yes, I'm doing an amazing job, but actually that is the valuable part, is the feedback. How can I continue to grow? And so, yes, if you go into it with that mindset of, yeah, I'm still learning, I'm still a beginner, I've still got so much more to learn, this job is never finished, or whatever that might be in life, you know, at the moment with coaching, whatever, you know, it's kind of almost getting that real desire and thirst for just loving what you do. And so that it almost becomes just natural and easy. And I think that is a very big part of it, is just cultivating the desire and the love of whatever it is you are learning. Because if you've got the love and the desire and you're following what feels good and following what lights you up, then it's just a natural process to want to know more. I mean, I know when I started on this journey, you know, when I switched careers and I started wanting to learn more about coaching and personal development, and it's just led me down so many different avenues and pathways that it's almost like, oh my gosh, there's now so much I want to learn. It's almost, I've got to try and rein it in and just kind of try and keep focused on one or two things. But it's so exciting. But I think for me, for so long, such a big part of my life, although when I was teaching, I was always learning. It wasn't that I wasn't, because you always are. But I think I'd lost the spark of desire, of what, you know, of it lighting me up. So it was when I found something else which really has, and it still does to this day, this, you know, I have constantly buying piles of books which I'm waiting to read, and things to listen to, and courses I want to do, just because I'm so interested. So I think for anybody, if they're like, oh, I just sort of pottering along my day and I don't really feel like I learn much. And for some people, maybe that's okay. And if you're happy that way, but maybe you just haven't found the thing yet, which is really igniting your soul to go, yes, I just want to know more about that.
Yeah, totally. I love that, Polly. One thing actually that I think is quite interesting is and important is we've got to be curious. And you mentioned that, you know, you said the word curiosity, and I think you did anyway, and it's that thing where when you cultivate curiosity about, you know, yourself and the world around you, and you follow that, that actually is when life gets really interesting. Because when you are curious about life and you're curious about things and you want to find out more about things, then it just makes life so much more interesting. And like you say, you know, both you and I have kind of dived into these worlds. We've had these sort of big changes in our lives. We're doing completely different things. And when you find that curiosity inside you, it just you know, it just helps you keep putting one foot in front of the other. It just keeps you moving. And like you again, another thing you mentioned was following what feels good. That's the other key, is finding that thing that, you know, finding that curiosity and just following it, and following what does light you up and following what does make you feel good. And actually, one thing that I've talked about quite a bit on my podcast, and I think is so incredibly important, is going back to, you know, when we're growing up, and we, you know, all of us from when we were kids, all of us have had this thing of either we were the really bright one or we were the really not bright one, or somewhere in between, but we all have a sense of our intelligence level, and many of us have taken that with us through life and allowed it to stop us from doing certain things if perhaps we you know, we didn't think of ourselves as particularly intelligent. But one thing I believe more and more and more and more, the older I get and the more that I learn, is that it's not always about being super bright or being super intelligent when it comes to success and when it comes to getting what you know, where you want to go. If you look around the world at the people who are, some people who are mega successful, they're not necessarily the person that went to Oxford or Harvard or, you know, were so-called super intelligent. It's the people who have the growth mindset to keep fricking going and to keep being persistent and to not quit. So much of this, so much of, I believe anyway, so much of you know, I'm using the word success, but just so much of doing what we want to do with our lives and getting where we want to go is to do with that determination and having the right mindset and having that resilience and that persistence. I believe that those things are so much more important than, well, she's really bright or she's really not. Again, back to myself, I failed my maths GCSE the first time around. Like, I failed my maths GCSE, right? Maths GCSE is not that hard. I failed it because I had a thing that I was shit at maths and, you know, blah 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 blah. And it's we mustn't allow those preconceived ideas of who we are and how intelligent we are. We mustn't allow them to stop us from chasing the things that we want to chase. Because again, it's not always the person who is the most intelligent who really reaches those great heights. It's the person who is determined, who keeps learning, who keeps growing, who doesn't give up. Those things in my book are way more important than whether you are the most intellectual person who gets straight A's in school and, you know, a first at university and all the rest of it. But somehow our society has sort of fixated on this idea of, you know, either you're intelligent or you're not. Yeah. And actually, it's one thing I say to my sister's kids. She gets so irritated with me because I always say to them, guys, because they're, in fact, my sister's triplets are literally about to start their A levels. And of course, you know, with good reason, they've been working really hard and they've been, you know, they're worried and they're concerned. But I've been saying to them for so long, as I say, Annie gets really irritated with me. I've been saying the results that you get for your A levels, they are not a predictor of how the rest of your life is going to go. You know, whether you get A's or whether you get E's is not necessarily going to be a reflection of how successful you are in your life. And that's what pains me, is when, you know, don't even get me started on the education system. I think we've touched on this before, haven't we?
I literally was about to say, don't get me started on the education system. It just doesn't, in this country, and I think it just doesn't work. And I know it does open doors for so many, and particularly around the world, it kind of opens the doors to so many, particularly in developing countries. And so we can't take it for granted. Yet, at the same time, it's just, I mean, you know, that's why I got out of it. It's just squashing so many other skills that our children have, creativity, so many just qualities which I really genuinely think are more important than just remembering stuff and regurgitating it in exams, and that just does not work. And so I say to my kids as well, okay, it's just these exams are hoops that you just have to jump through, and okay, it might open up more choices for you ultimately, but you just got to it's literally a game. You just got to play the game, jump through the hoops, and ultimately it doesn't decide anything of what you're going to do in the future. You can do whatever you put your mind to. You really, really can. And I don't think that message is spread enough, that honestly, if you want to do something, just follow the joy. You'll get in there somewhere. Start at the bottom, go and just ask somebody again and again, find out somebody you want to work for, and just kind of go, right, I'll do anything for you, I'll do anything, I'll make your coffee, I'm going to do whatever, and get your foot in the door and just work your way up, learn a trade, whatever that might be. So I just really think that nowadays the most important thing is just to really learn that resilience. As you said before, it's just like, if you don't get a yes first time, ask again. It was Thomas Edison who did the light bulb, who tried about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times before he got, I think it was him, anyway, I might be wrong, any inventor will tell you don't get it first time. You try hundreds of thousands of times until you get what you want. And I think we forget that, behind any successful, in inverted commas, person who's doing anything, they wouldn't have just got it straight away. There's a huge amount of effort behind that. So that is what I really believe children should be taught in schools.
Same. 100%. I've just, it infuriates me. It just frustrates me because, when I think back to me at school and then I look at my sister's kids now, it's like, well, the history and the maths and the science and the blah, 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 blah. And it's like, oh my God, what actually, look, don't get me wrong. Don't let me go off on a rant, Polly, rein me in. But it's like, how much of, apart from anything else, I literally can remember sweet FA from what I learned at school, like literally.
Anyway nowadays.
Yeah. And exactly. And also one thing that you said is that, yes, obviously education, A levels and university and whatever can open doors, and it can give you opportunity. However, another thing I've said to my sister's kids is, if I could go back, do you know what? I wouldn't fucking bother with university, because it's really barely worth the piece of paper that it's written on. Not that I even went to my graduation ceremony to get that piece of paper, but hey, that's another story. But I believe so fully that if I went back, with hindsight, if I go back in time, I wouldn't have bothered with university. I would have gone straight, because when I was, for example, when I was getting into Radio 2, me getting into Radio 2 was literally nothing to do with where I went to school or the fact that I had a degree. What it was to do with was the fact that I decided that I wanted to work at Radio 2, and I did every single thing that I needed to do to get in there, which looked like finding out people's phone numbers, which, as you could in the day, finding out people's email addresses, literally hounding people in a nice way, in a way, hopefully not in a crazy way, but literally that is how I got into Radio 2. I made a decision that is where I wanted to work, because I was motivated by my passion for music and the kind of programs that they made and the eclectic mix of music. I was like, that is where I want to work. And I literally, I refused to give up. I literally refused to give up. I was like, I'm going to work for Radio 2. I don't give a shit what anyone says. I don't care how hard it is. Everyone's like, oh, it's really hard to get in because it's the biggest radio station in Europe, and blah 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 blah. And I was like, I don't care. That's what I'm doing.
And you did.
And I fucking did it, because for no other reason. Not because I'm brainy, not because I have a psychology degree, not for any of those reasons. The reason is that I was persistent, and I made an effort, and I kept an open mind, and I just was determined, and I kept going and going and going and going, and that is how it happened. So yes, although doors can be opened up because we happen to have a degree from Oxford or whatever, not that my degree was from Oxford, my degree was from Oxford Brookes. Just leave the second word off. But yes, that's all I have to say. Now you go, because I'm now rambling on. I mean, don't you?
Yeah, no, well, I mean, I agree with you. I think, it is a hard one, because I then think about, the wider global world, people, particularly children in third world countries, and, education really is the key to help with them to kind of, get out and open up doors. But I think, if we're talking more about just us today, grown ups, actually, I think, as we've said before, it's just about continuing to just believe that you can do whatever you want. And I do think, particularly, at midlife, for example, you get to a point, and as you said, Lucy, I'm shit at maths, or, you kind of put yourself in these boxes. And I just would like to, I think we should all challenge that. And okay, maybe your brain is better for, programmed for words rather than numbers. And, we all have things and ways that we lean more towards too. However, I do think you can learn. It's never too late to learn to get better. I mean, all of what I'm doing now, I honestly, have learned so much in terms of running a business, just in terms of podcasting, in terms of all of that. I mean, doing a podcast was a great example of learning in my 40s, a completely new skill, learning all the tech side. And I think that's another big one, in terms of technology. My mum, for example, has always struggled. She's always struggled to keep up with the technology. She hasn't got a phone. She hasn't got an email, and she refused when everything was moving. She just my dad really tried really hard to get her to learn all these things. But her mindset was just very much like, oh, I hate technology. I don't like it. I don't need it. And was very, very fixed in that way. And so has never never got on board with it, which is such a shame, because in terms of communicating with me, with my sister, with all of her grandchildren, it's just kind of almost kept her quite isolated. And that is a really good example. I think it's just like, you've got to keep up learning, growing, keeping up with developments in technology, rather than going, oh, it's not for me, I don't like it, I don't like the way the world is going. Well, it's going this way. So actually, we have, if you want to keep up with it all, you've just got to keep learning. You've got to challenge yourself. And okay, technology can be a bit faffy, and you do hear a lot, don't you? People saying, oh, I'm just not very techie minded. I hate it. And okay, you might. But actually, I really think it's important to keep learning and keep up to date, and just so that, we're not left behind, because otherwise you will be left behind. Things are changing so fast.
My mum is exactly the same. I mean, she does have a phone, but the kind of phone that she has does my head in. I don't even know what kind of phone it is. I've never seen one like it in my life. It's awful. And I keep saying, oh my God, please get an iPhone. She's like, no. And she's got a classic fixed mindset when it comes to that, like totally. No way of kind of, I mean, my mum will not even tap her card. She won't even tap to pay. She's like, no, I'm putting it in. I'm using the PIN number. I'm like, oh God, Mum, literally. But yes, we're right on time, Polly.
Yes.
We've done 29 minutes, so I think we can wrap it up. But I think the long and short of it is just, do not think that you can't do something. We can still, well into our 90s, we can change our brain through neuroplasticity. That is a scientific fact. Yeah. All of us can, no exceptions. So we can get smarter. And if we want something, then sorry, go for it, love. Well,
I was going to say, just to finish on, in terms of that, because our brains are able to change through neuroplasticity. One way we can really support ourselves is to take on new challenges, and again, it's never too late. When I went to South Africa earlier in the year, one of my parents' friends, he was learning a new language. All these sorts of things are so good to just keep our brains growing and changing. And so, yes, it's like, just take on something new. And actually, on that note, I am definitely going to start. Well, I used to speak Italian. I've completely forgot it. So I keep saying I've got to get my Duolingo going and just keep refreshing. all those sorts of things, like learning a musical instrument, learning to knit, they use different parts of your brain. So they're really good ways to just keep our brains kind of sparking and alive.
Absolutely. Well, on that note,
it's
been a pleasure.
It has. Thank you, Lucy.
Speak to you later, love. Have a nice day.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.